Tattoo artists. What was your worst mistake and how did the client react? Part 2. Unfortunately, during my apprenticeship I messed up plenty of tattoos. My mentor wouldn't exactly mentor me. He would pop in while I was tattooing, say nothing and leave. Then give me advice after the fact, instead of giving me direction during the process so I wouldn't fuck things up. I wasn't allowed to buy machines. He was very old school. I had to build my own machine and needles. Well, I'm not mechanically inclined at all. So I constantly had machines on the fritz, which of course affects everything. He also wouldn't give me a reliable power source. I had to use this massive ancient power source that was used by hospitals in what appeared to be the 80s. It would also go on the fritz, making at times my needles stop right in the skin, making me cut them. What a nightmare. I was doing a big old tattoo of Cringer, aka Battle Cat, on a really cool client's leg. I got so into doing this big, awesome tiger head that I forgot that it wasn't a goddamn tiger and colored the stripes black. I realized about a third of the way through filling them in and let the guy know. He was disappointed, but mostly okay with it. I felt like I was going to puke. I finished the thing feeling so fucking sick and then refused payment. Man, going from that feeling of elation to immediate crushing disappointment was hard to shake, and kind of dazed me. It was extra crushing because it was a fun tattoo during a time when I wasn't that busy and was doing mostly absolute dreck. The payment was just the icing on the top, so letting that go was hard too. Ugh. Just thinking about it now is making me feel sick. Girl I used to know was tattooing a Manchester City badge onto someone. Little bit airy around the ears. She's thinking of her boyfriend while she's doing it, who's a Manchester United fan. 2 hours later, irate customer returns demanding to know why she has a City badge tattooed on her leg with the letters MUFC in the scroll. I went to college with a veteran tattoo artist and she told me that she's made a few mistakes, but nothing too crazy. She told me the worst freakout a customer had was when she was making a Celtic knot to his own specifications. Despite her telling him that that isn't how they're supposed to look, he paid for it anyways. She made the tattoo, and the idiot didn't like the results and pushed over a couple shelves and broke the window with a chair in frustration, all while cussing her out. When he was arrested for his blunder, the police uncovered a lot more about him than his terrible tattoo idea. It aimed to light that not only was he addicted to heroin and evaded taxes, but he also abused his wife and son. I've never really made any big mistakes that garnered a reaction, but one of my clients has a tattoo from another artist in a local studio that says Greydad instead of Granddad. The studio fired the artist and wouldn't take any responsibility for what had happened. Once had a client call the shop who was crying hysterically because, according to her, I had done her tattoo backwards. It took a few minutes to get her to calm down to the point where we realized she was looking at it in the mirror. She apologized and hung up. Edit: thanks for the upvotes and awards. You're all too kind. Second edit: the tattoo was on her back. When I placed the stencil and finished the tattoo, the client was using 2 mirrors. A handheld one, and the wall-mounted one. Using 2 mirrors. It looked correct, which it was. When she looked in just one mirror at home, it appeared backwards. The way a mirror works. I was working at a shop in NYC. This very heavy-set gentleman came in and wanted a full back piece. No other tattoos. The design was very elaborate and quite good. Once it was all approved, the tattoo stencil was applied, and again approved by the client. I wasn't doing the tattoo, but I was occasionally checking in on the process. Once the line work was done as shading had begun, I noticed something horrible. The stencil was applied over his rolls of skin on his lower back. I made a comment to the artist privately. He went back to tattooing, moved the skin apart at one point, and without a doubt several inches of untattooed skin. The client never noticed. I stopped working there not too long after that. Not for this reason. I've always felt so bad for that guy. Worst was when I just started out tattooing. A few months in, I'm tattooing an old co-worker's wife and she's getting some Roman numerals, and before starting I ask her to triple check the numbers and she's like, yup, all good, let's do it. 1 hour after being done I receive a text from my old co-worker that one of the letters are wrong. That was a great week to be alive dealing with that anxiety. I tattooed Philippines 413 instead of Philippians 413 on a girl one time. Fortunately I was able fix it though. Oh recently I did an armband of sheet music on this walk-in and I put one of the segments on upside down because I don't read music and it looked right. Client noticed when I was about halfway done with that segment. Luckily she was cool and just said she should have checked her stencil harder and shrugged it off. Being young and dumb. I went to an underground tattoo artist. First mistake. I was getting a Lil Wayne quote that states love. Live life. Proceed. Progress. Second mistake. It's vertical along the side of my body so I couldn't really see all the letters closer to the top half. So I approved the design with no worry. I walked out with love. Live life. Proceed. Progress not progress. Progress. Needless to say. I had a cover-up tattoo by a teen. Listen to your parents. Kids. When I started tattooing I was working at an awful studio that would often give me works that didn't fit my style in any way, very fine line works which I wasn't very good at. The mistakes I made were usually crooked tattoos or going too deep and instead of actual helping me the owners either would yell at me later. Forced me to tell clients I was more experienced than I actually am and got upset that I asked too many questions. Eventually they just stopped giving me work altogether. Sadly every once in a while they give my number to unhappy clients that I tattooed at that time and I still get calls asking me for compensation. I know it's also my fault for those things but they really took up any responsibility. These days I have my own small one-person studio. I have nothing but sweet and satisfied clients and ironically I do a lot of fine line tattoos which I used to hate at that studio. But if you want something specific while I was in the studio some girl wanted a cursive tattoo that was extremely tiny. It was extremely small and thin and when I finished it looked good but when it healed a lot of the letters spread and mashed up together and because she barely had any tattoos it was very noticeable. I gave her money back even though she demanded me to pay for tattoo removal. And yes she signed a contract beforehand but the studio told me it protected only them and not me. I read thoroughly and fortunately realized she had no case against me so she couldn't sue. In general today I recommend people to steer clear of that place. Disgusting money grabber assholes. They do treat other tattoo artists who work for them like shit. I've been tattooing for a while. I'm dyslexic as fuck. I always give the client a look at my design and we spell check every word. Twice. Once before the stencil goes on and again once it's on the skin before we start tattooing. People still spell names wrong and get dates wrong all the time. But the worst thing that I've had go wrong is with aftercare. I use second skin product to help heal the tattoo. A client had a shower. And the second skin wasn't airtight. Water got in and they didn't notice. Basically the whole tattoo ended up as one big wet scab. And peeled out. 3 months of healing later reworked it and it ended up being okay. I had a client who decided he wanted lettering on his forearms. Sayings in Greek and Hebrew. He doesn't speak either language. But he had one of his friends double check the spelling before he sent the references to me. Came in. We did the tattoos. Pretty simple appointment. Fast forward to a couple weeks later. I get a message from my client about the tattoo that was done in Hebrew. He owns a small construction/restoration company. And has a few Israeli guys who work for him. Apparently. They were giving him a lot of shit for his Hebrew tattoo. He originally thought they were just messing with him. Because it was spelled wrong. The font he had chosen off a quick Google search essentially changed a couple of the letters, kinda like the difference between an F and a T. Making it a completely different word. We ended up being able to fix it pretty easily and had a good laugh about it. But definitely beware when you're getting tattoos in a language you and your artist don't speak. Artist here. Spelling mistakes are common in the industry. I'm the first to tell a customer that I'm a terrible speller so they had better check everything before the needle hits the skin. I once had a customer who had to call his wife and confirm how they spelled their daughter's name before we got started. And it's a good thing he did. But oftentimes the worst mistakes are stray lines, most often caused by flinching, or missing details, usually a result of losing part of a stencil during the tattoo process. I've heard of clients being fairly crushed by tattoo mistakes. But generally they can be corrected with a little creativity and skill. My worst mistake was made when I was learning to tattoo. As an apprentice I had to take what I could get when it came to practicing, thank goodness for dumb friends. I tattooed over some very thin skin for the first time, inside the elbow, and blew out a couple of the lines. A blowout is when the needle goes a little too deep and the ink spreads a bit in the soft slushy layers of the skin. It looks like a permanent bruise, and in this case it looked like the tattoo was trying to cover up track marks. She didn't say much about it at the time, but I knew she was pissed. Luckily, I was eventually able to shade over the area and cover up the mistake when we added to the tattoo. I was tattooing the inside of an ear for the first time, the cartilage not like inside the inner ear, and my mentor was showing me a trick they use when stretching the ear skin involving holding the ear back with Q-tips. Holding like chopsticks cause they get slippery. It seemed a little awkward. But he did my mentor's instructions despite the odd angles. Right as I was putting in the final line, the Q-tip slipped and I party-dotted my client on the helix as her ear flipped back. Luckily the client was a regular of mine since I first started and laughed about it. I was more traumatized than she was. Offered to waive the cost and she insisted on paying me anyway and tipped handsomely. So lucky that happened with a chill-ass regular and not some asshole Karen or Chad. Thanks for watching.